Affairs Committee. Congressman, you happy Netanyahu won?
Well, I'm happy that Israel is a democracy and that the Israeli people decided who their leader is going to be. I'm happy about that. I never take positions in other countries' elections, but I think it shows that in contrast to every other nation in the Middle East, Israelis go to the polls just like Americans do, and they vote for their leaders just like we do.
How concerned are you, Congressman, that in the days leading up, in the day before actually the election, the Prime Minister reversed his position? Since 2009, he supported what's called a two-state solution, a new state of Palestine emerging alongside Israel. And then on the day before the election, he said under his watch there will be no Palestine, no two-state solution, which of course has caused enormous concern not only in the U.S. but around the world. Are you concerned about that?
I think that in the rhetoric and in the heat of campaigns, there are lots of things that are said, and I think when they get shaken out, I think we'll find pretty much that not much has changed. There are many people who support a two-state solution. I personally do, and I think that hopefully we can have negotiations between Israelis and Palestinians in the not-too-distant future. I know it seems a bit remote now, but I think the goal would be to have Israelis and Palestinians living side by side in peace. So I'm not worried about what may or may not have been said in campaign rhetoric in the closing days of a campaign. I think there are lots of issues to be tackled. Israel and the United States have always been close allies, and I think we will continue to be close allies.
So what you're saying is Netanyahu really didn't mean it when he said it 24 hours before the election. It was only campaign rhetoric, and now that presumably, if in fact he does succeed in the coming weeks to form this new coalition government, he's going to go back to his earlier position?
Well, I don't know what was in his head. I can't really speak of it. I assume he says what he believes, but I think that there are always nuanced positions, and I suppose that as the days go on, that position might well be nuanced, but it's impossible for me to get into his head. I just think that Israel is a democracy, and I'm happy that the people of Israel express their desire for their leader and who they want to lead them into the coming years. And I think we in the United States have to respect that. There are not many democracies in the world, and Israel is one of them, and that's why the U.S. and Israel have always had a strong relationship. Two democracies, shared values. That's why we back Israel.
What do you make of all the concern in Israel, certainly by his critics? There's concern expressed here in Washington as well that some of his statements seemingly belittling Israeli Arabs, citizens of Israel, warning the Israelis the Arabs are going to vote in big numbers, they're coming out in big numbers. He's really getting criticized for that, for going against what 20% of the Israeli population are Israeli Arab citizens. Were you upset when you heard that kind of commentary?
Well, I think that, it's hard again to get into somebody's head and see why they said it. I think that he assumes that the Arab parties, which have unified for the election, were running on one slate, and that the Arabs of Israel were not going to vote for him. So I assume he was saying to his supporters, the others who are not going to be for me are voting, so you've got to come out and vote to counterbalance that. Perhaps it wasn't the right choice of words. It probably wasn't, but I think it was, again, campaign rhetoric, and I wouldn't read too much into it.
Eliot Engel is the ranking Democrat of the House Foreign Affairs Committee. Congressman, thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you, Wolf. It's always a pleasure.
All right, new polls